right. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. For those of you who don't know, we are really celebrating the adventure of a new school year in the month of September. We are connecting you with scientists, explorers, adventurers who have overcome obstacles, who have had successes and failures, who can tell us stories of resiliency, and setting goals and things like that. We want to get you really excited and really pumped for the new school year. So today our guest is scheduled to be Victor Vescovo, and I saw him just pop in backstage. So I'm going to bring him in on camera in just a moment. We might have to sort out the share screen to begin with, but that's no big deal. Victor is going to take us on a little deep sea adventure today. He is a deep sea explorer who's explored the deepest places on planet Earth. He's skied to both poles. He's climbed the highest peaks on each continent. He's now the first person in history to have been to the top of all the world's continents, as well as the bottom of all its oceans. He's also an accomplished pilot of jet fixed wing aircraft, helicopters, and most recently, manned submersibles.
So again, I challenge all you guys to try and identify the 5 oceans. Everybody always gets the Pacific and the Atlantic, and even maybe the Indian, maybe the Arctic. But what's the 5th? The 5th is the Southern Ocean around the bottom of Antarctica. But that's what we did. We went to all 5 of those, and I'll tell you about it. That's the submarine on the right that I helped design and build over about 4 years and eventually piloted it. And I was in the Navy for 20 years. So if any of you have any interest at all in joining the armed services, my compliments to you. It's a wonderful career and one of the best things I've ever done. There's a great science fiction writer who said, how inappropriate to call this planet Earth when it's clearly ocean. Believe it or not, 71% of planet Earth is ocean. It's not land. So actually, we're more of a water world than we are a land world. And most people forget that. In fact, the average place on planet Earth is 4,000 meters, or about 15,000 feet underwater. Most of this planet is not on land. It's deep, deep underwater, and yet we know so little about it. And you just have on this map, looking at the depth of all the different oceans, the average depth of the ocean is about 5,000 meters. And on these huge plains in the Pacific and the Atlantic and the Indian Oceans that are wide expanses, and you can see that on the map. So yeah, the average water depth is more than 4,000 meters, which is just really impressive. And by the way, we use the metric system when we're exploring the ocean because most of the world uses the metric system except for the United States and a couple of other countries. And so you have to convert everything to metric when you start doing exploration in the ocean with other countries. So I'll go really quickly through what I did for 4 years. First, we did the 5 Deeps expedition, and then we journeyed all around the Mediterranean, and then we did the so-called Ring of Fire expeditions. And we call it that because geologists call the whole area around the Pacific Ocean a ring of fire, because the way geology works, there are a lot of volcanoes and very difficult terrain all around in a circle around the Pacific Ocean. And so we explored that because that's some of the most dynamic and moving parts of this world, and we wanted to explore them. So for us, first we just had to design and build a submersible that had never existed before. We had to develop a scientific team to find little creatures all over the seafloor. And then we also had to map the oceans. Believe it or not, we didn't even know where the bottom of 5 of the world's oceans were. So we actually had to put something called a sonar on the bottom of our ship to actually send sound waves through the ocean, bounce them off the bottom, and then that would give us information that we could use to construct maps so we would know where to dive. So what did we need? We needed something called a full ocean depth submersible, which is like a miniature submarine. And full ocean depth just means it can go to the very, very bottom of the ocean, which is 35,000 feet deep. That's deeper than Mount Everest is high. In fact, it's a lot deeper than Mount Everest is high. We had to get a ship. We had to get landers. Those were little robots that went with the submarine down to the bottom. And we needed this sonar to actually map the seafloor. I needed a lot of great people. So if any of you out there are interested in doing research or going into the ocean, it was a very exciting expedition to go on. Everything we were doing was new. We got to learn a great deal and then got to share it with the rest of the world. and hopefully understand our world a lot better to hopefully make it better over time. And it also took a lot of money. And I paid for it all myself. And so that's one of the nice benefits. If you're successful in life, you have the ability to pick things that you would like to become involved in and then just set out and do them. Why did we do it? Well, I come from Texas, and here in Texas, sometimes we think if something needs doing, we don't just say, oh, the government should do it. A lot of times in life, individuals have to just decide to do something and make sure that it happens. You know, sometimes it all starts just with you, and you have to see it through. You can't just lay stuff off on other people. Like I said, if not me or us, who? The design of the submersible started on a napkin, as many of these things often do, and that's what it looks like. It's kind of unusual looking. That area in the middle was actually a place for two people, and the things that look like teeth at the top of that little circle are actually oxygen bottles. That's how we actually breathed when we were down in the depths of the ocean. And then you can see the thrusters that move the submarine on the edges there. And then the rest of the volume of the submersible were things like batteries or areas for water to come in so that the submersible could sink in water, and then we could exit the water so it could float. And then there was a tube, a trunk as it's called here, that we had to crawl through to get into the capsule on the bottom. And this is just an example of how we designed it using computers. First, we had the two people we wanted to put in it, and then we had to design the submersible around the people, all the electronics. There are the oxygen bottles that gave us 4 days of oxygen, although we would only spend about half a day on the missions, but we needed a safety margin, a big one, to protect us in case something went wrong. And then we encapsulated it in a titanium ball. And titanium is a metal that weighs half as much as steel, but it's twice as strong. But unfortunately, it's also very expensive. But we needed it so that we could build something that we could survive in. And then we built everything else around it. We put very complicated windows in it so we could see, and a hatch so we could get in. And then we built the rest of the submarine around it, all titanium. We would put things on it so we could lift it up and move it around the ship. We put thrusters on it, batteries. We put foam on it so it could float in water. And this is all very complicated. And, you know, in your educational careers, you've got to learn how to do this stuff if you want to do interesting things in life. But I had some wonderful experts that knew how to put all this together. And first we built it in a computer, and then we built it for real. And there's a lot of complicated elements to it that we're showing here. But at the end of the day, when we finished everything, we ended up with this amazing submersible that could go up and down in the water. And it looks like a stuffed pillow because it was designed to go up and down in the water very efficiently, not side to side or forward and backward. It could still move reasonably fast at, maybe a couple of miles per hour, but it was mainly designed to go up and down in the water and survive because it's really harsh down there at the very bottom of the ocean. An enormous amount of pressure is pushing in on you. Imagine 4 automobiles stacked one on top of each other on your fingernail. That's how much pressure exists on every part of a submersible that goes to the very bottom of the ocean. If things ever got difficult where the submarine was entangled in a rope, we could eject parts of the submarine off to free it up. That was a safety measure. So a very complicated device, but it all worked out well. These are just some pictures of us making the submersible. I won't get into the navigation. That gets really complicated really fast, but here's the ship that we actually had to use. So we put the submersible on the back of the ship. It was about 240 feet long. We could have up to about 50 people on the ship at any one time. And we literally took it around the world with the submarine to go and do all these different dives. I won't go through all the different, fixing up a ship. It's like cleaning your house. And eventually we made it really nice. We put a hangar on the back for the submersible to live in, a kind of a garage at sea for the submarine. And then we went all over the world. And there's an iceberg that we had to dodge near Antarctica when we were diving the submersible. But we went all over the world in just 10 months. And this is a map of what we did. These are the 5 oceans that we dove in. We started in the Atlantic, and then we went down to the Southern Ocean, then the Indian, and then the deepest point in the ocean, the Challenger Deep in the Pacific Ocean. And then we ended up by going through the Panama Canal. We stopped by the RMS Titanic and dove the Titanic because it was on the way. And then we went to the Arctic Ocean and dove to the bottom of that ocean, and that completed the 5 deeps in the year 2019. So we had to build a prototype submarine. That was really difficult. We had to get permits from all the different governments that we interacted with, and we just had to figure out how to do this, which had never been done before. This is how a sonar map works. And so when you're in the ship bounces sound waves off the bottom of the ocean as it's moving. And so line by line, the ship is building up a profile of what the bottom of the ocean looks like. Think about yelling into your pool and being able to listen to the reflections of the sound waves coming back to you. Well, you put all that information into a computer and it can actually build a map of the seafloor. You can't use radio and you can't see the bottom of the seafloor because water, you can't see through it that far. So this is what we did to find the bottom of the oceans, and we built a map. And we mapped about 4 million square kilometers of ocean to do this mission. And that's what a map looks like when you're done. You can see all the mountains and hills and valleys after you make a map. And this is how we found the deepest point in the Indian Ocean. We mapped the whole trench area of the Indian Ocean and discovered that the deepest point was right there in the middle where that triangle is. It was nowhere people thought it was. And we thought it might be over on the left. We thought it might be over on the right, but eventually it was right there in the middle. And that's where we dove the submarine. And we did all that in 6 days, which is pretty fast. I'll go through some of this. Some of the science that we did was amazing. These are the little robotic landers that went down with me. They would film the fishes and the submarine as it operated. They would take samples of the soil, of the water. They would capture fish and bring them back. They were my little workhorses that helped us do a lot of the science like you do in some of your science classes, but this was for real. These are some of the creatures that we saw. That right there on the right is the deepest octopus ever recorded. It's called a Dumbo octopus, and that's because it looks like the Disney character Dumbo the elephant. But that's a real creature that we discovered, and those are some of its friends. A fish that's one of the deepest in the world, and then that shrimp at the bottom, which is also one of the deepest shrimp ever discovered. And we also mapped a great deal of the ocean floor. You can just look at how jagged and violent some of the bottom of the ocean is with all those mountain ranges. There are more and bigger mountain ranges on the bottom of the ocean than there are on land. If you think Mount Everest is high and the Himalayan mountain range is big, they are nothing compared to what is on the bottom of the ocean. This is just an example of one huge, long trench off the coast of Indonesia that we mapped. You can just see how massive it is. And this is a video of the deepest point in the whole ocean. This is the Mariana Trench in the Pacific, and that's the Challenger Deep, the deepest point in the ocean. And I've been there many, many times, but this is a map that my ship built that shows in an animation, what it looks like. And we had never had anything this detailed before. But that's where parts of the Earth are colliding with one another to make the continents. And here we were traveling up that trench to all these different areas. And there's a huge mountain right there in the middle of it that you can see. And then there's another deep part just on the other side. We went there too. So we were really being explorers. We were going places no human being had ever been before. Okay. We discovered some of the rocks and tried to bring them up, which was really, really hard because it's a long way down and the conditions are very, very difficult. I think we have about 300 or 400 pounds of moon rocks that the astronauts brought back from the moon, but I believe we have less than 10 pounds of rocks from the bottom of the ocean because it's even more difficult to get rocks from the bottom of the ocean than it is from the moon. That's one of my little lander robots on the bottom with me. I filmed him, he filmed me, and some of the little fishes running around. There's a picture of the submarine taken from the lander. Prove we went there. And so that really gets to it. I mean, the ocean is a huge, wonderful place. This is an example of what we can do with the sonar. We can take the water away and see the deepest points in the ocean, and then we ended up diving them. There's a lot of other things that we did. This is another animation of what it looks like when you dive to the bottom of the ocean. There are lights on the submarine so we could see, and we had sonar so we could map it, and then it would just travel along the bottom, and we would try and investigate as much as we could for as long as we could to discover new things. Every single place that we dove in, we usually found a new species because no human had ever been there before. And this is probably the strangest creature we ever saw. This was something that was kind of like a jellyfish, but you can see it floating towards the robot. I think it smelled the dead fish there in front. And we had never seen a creature like this before. And it went right in front of the camera. It turned and then presented its face to us and kept going by. We called this one Snoop Dog because it kind of looked like a dog's head. But this is a new species that had never been discovered before, and probably the most unusual thing that we found on all of our travels. And then we found other bizarre things. It may be difficult for you guys to see this, but you'll see something drift from right to left. And it's a colony of very tiny creatures. You see it there in the middle? Whoops, that's the wrong one. Right there in the middle, you can see, whoops. In the middle, you can see a colony of creatures that are connected, and they just drifted past the camera. That is completely like an alien creature colony that we saw. So you've just discovered amazing things. You get to see some amazing places like here in the South Atlantic. That's the ship at South Georgia Island. I got to go to the Titanic, got to see that and film it for the first time in 15 years. But we need to do a lot more. We need to keep doing deep marine research. We need young people to become interested in not just biology of creatures, but also the rocks, the geology, how it all works together, the mapping, the how this affects climate change. We have to do a lot of mathematical modeling so we can predict what will happen in the future. And even archaeology, looking for wrecks in the deep ocean. So there's a whole lot of really interesting stuff that you can do in the ocean, and you don't have to do just one thing. I was fortunate we were able to do a lot of different things, and you can too. Just study your science, study your math, but most of all, just continue to be curious. If there's one thing that drives us forward as a people, it's just having a lot of curiosity, being curious about the world around us, and reading and researching about all these different things, and then trying to contribute new knowledge so we can keep pushing forward and making the world a better place. So that really is what I had to share with you today. I hope it was interesting, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
All right, Victor, it definitely was interesting. It is such an amazing expedition, and to build it from the ground up, I think that is the most fascinating part. And I just want to put something in perspective for the students, Victor. Before your expedition, trips down there were pretty spread apart. It was a person or two at a time. How many times have you visited that deepest point?
I've personally been there 15 times, and I don't think anyone else has been there more than 3. But in many respects, we spent so much time there because it was the harshest place on the planet, and therefore the best place to test the submersible to its absolute limits. So I'm actually a certified test pilot for submarines. So that in many respects was my job, was to take it down there and push it to its limits. But we also went to a lot of other places. I've probably done about 70 or 80 dives.
All right. Well, as classrooms get their questions ready, I pulled a little Kahoot quiz behind the scenes together. And so the classrooms are going to play a little Kahoot against each other. And we'll take a few questions while the classrooms are joining us as well. So I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
Classrooms, you need to head over to kahoot.it, and then it's going to ask you for a PIN number. Today's PIN is 904246. If you have one-to-one tech at your desk, maybe a tablet or a Chromebook, you can join that way. If not, your teacher could pop it up at the front of the classroom. You could shout out your answers to him or her, or you could just play along with us. While we have students and classes joining us, I'm going to start bringing in some live classrooms, and we'll start with a few questions while we get things started. So I want to start with Madame Marvin's class. Let me bring them in here front and center. Hey, Madame Marvin's crew. How are you?
We have a few questions for you.
How many bots did it take to take all those photos, including the sub?
How many watts did it take?
How many bots did it take to get all of the photos?
The robots.
Right. We actually had 3 robots, and we gave them names. We named them Scaff, Kloss, and Flare. And those are names that I picked out of a science fiction book but we built 3 of them, and we did that so we always were assured that we would have at least one, but sometimes all 3 of them went down with me. So they were my little friends that kept me company down on the bottom.
All right, hit us with another question.
Was it dangerous?
Well, when you're testing something that's never been built before and you're taking it to a very extreme place, yes, there was a bit of danger involved, but we did enough work beforehand to make sure that it was safe for the pilot. It wasn't 100% safe, but it was pretty high. And the fact that I'm still here, I think, shows that it was pretty safe. But you're not going to explore the world and do, dangerous things by always playing it safe.
All right, Toronto, squeeze one more in. Can you try that a little closer?
How did you make the robots?
How do we make the boxes? Well, we started, as always, with what do we need them to be able to do? We needed them to be able to film, to collect samples.
How did you make
How did we make the robots? Well, we got pieces of aluminum, we welded them together. We got all the different parts from different manufacturers, and we put them all together so they could do the things that we needed them to do. It took about 4 months for each robot.
All right. Thank you, Madame Marvin's class. Give us a big wave. I know you guys have to leave early today. So thanks for hanging out with us today. I'm going to grab another classroom. There they are. I'm going to grab another classroom here. This time we're going to go to Mrs. Cullen's crew. How are we doing today, Mrs. Cullen's class? All right, excellent. Mrs. Cullen's class is joining us in Ohio. We're ready for a question or two.
All right, Brady, you want to come up? Brady, come over here. Just hold it up and then ask it you, okay?
How much did it cost?
Oh, there's a guy after my own heart. How much did it cost? It cost a lot. It's actually in the public. It was publicly disclosed, but it roughly cost about $50 million to do everything in the first year. It cost a lot.
Okay. Next question.
All right, we'll squeeze one more in from your group in Ohio, then I think we're ready to play Kahoot.
All right, we have one more here.
We can hear you. You don't have to write them out.
Oh, what? It helps if we get cut out. That's what. Go ahead, say it.
How many Guinness World Records do you have?
I think I have about 10. I was the first person to go to the bottom of the ocean and then to the top of Mount Everest. And then I went into space as well. But I also went down 15 times, which is a record. And then we also, with the submersible, we found the deepest shipwreck ever recorded at about 6,800 meters. So we did a lot of amazing things with the submersible that, we weren't looking for world records, but they kind of happened as we did things.
All right. Thank you to our group in Ohio. We're going to play some Kahoot, and then I'm going to start bringing our camera classes back in. Let's kickstart the Kahoot. Remember, the quicker you put in the right answer, the more points you're going to get. It's quick, only 20 seconds for each question, so you need to be fast. Here we go. All right. Average depth of the ocean is 1,000 meters, 3,000 meters, 4,000 meters, or 6,500 meters. I can see our answers flying in already.
I don't get to play, do I?
Well, I mean, you could jot down the answers. You could check your score at the end. So 1,000, 3,000, 4,000. All right, crew, good job. Most students went with 4,000 meters. Let's jump to our scoreboard. We got the cute bat in first place. And we're going to go to our next question. Little true and false action. There are 4 named oceans. True or false? We've named 4 regions of the ocean. 4 named oceans. True or false? I like to think of the ocean as just one big connected body of water, but in geography, we like to name things. So
it makes it a little more convenient.
yeah, absolutely. So you're right, that is false. There are 5 named oceans. Good job, crew. Let's take a look at our leaderboard. The Royal Rhino taking that top spot. One more true and false coming your way. The deepest trench is deeper than Mount Everest is high. Is that true? The deepest? Man, I can hear the answers. There's already 50 answers in. You guys are fast. Deepest trench is deeper than Mount Everest is high. True or false? This is going to be a hotly contested Kahoot quiz today. All right. True. Good job, crew. What happened to our leaderboard? Ooh, Royal Rhino holding tough for 2 questions. Last question. How many days of oxygen could the submersible carry? Was it 2, 4, 6, or 8? So that little...
Days of oxygen. You don't want to be trapped in a submarine that long, I'll tell you.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. I imagine bathroom and other things would become issues.
Yeah.
2, 4, 6, or 8 days of oxygen. Good job, crew. Most students went with 4. Let's take a look at our podium, and then we'll go back to Q&A for a little bit. The Dandy Camel in 3rd place. In 2nd place, we've got the Noble Snail. And holding down that top spot, the Royal Rhino. All right.
I'll add something the kids might be interested in. I've only been attacked by one wild animal in my whole life, and it was a penguin.
Wow. They got sharp beaks. They can be pretty tough.
Yep.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. Let's get some more Q&A action happening here. We are going to go to Maine now. We have some 4th graders in Maine. Let me bring them in front and center. Oops.
Cool.
There we go.
Oh, just in Maine. Maine is wonderful.
There we go.
Hello. And now.
Hello, my name is Jonah. I'm from Maine, and my question is, what does it actually sound like down there?
Oh, that's a good question. I've rarely gotten that question. That's a good one. You know what? It's funny. Imagine putting earmuffs on, which I'm sure you do a lot in Maine, but imagine like the whole world sounding muffled with almost like a little bit of a hum in the background. You don't really hear much when you're in the submersible, but we've put microphones on the robots and they record sound, and there is sound in the deep, deep ocean. And if there's an earthquake or there's something major that happens in the ocean floor, that sound travels all over the world and you can hear a vibration. So it's very unusual. It's not like what you have up here on land, but there absolutely is sound down there. And there are some scientists that spend their whole lives studying those sounds.
Nice. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. You got another one we can squeeze in before we visit another crew?
Hello, my name is Kim. How many new species did you discover?
Well, we're not sure. We know we discovered at least 40 or 50, but it could be as high as several hundred. The issue is that the scientists have to go back and see if what we captured are in fact different species than other things that we've already found. But we're pretty convinced we found an enormous number of new species just because we went so many places where no human had ever been. So that's really exciting.
All right. Great questions from Maine. Building on that question, before I go to a camera classroom, I have a question on YouTube from Miss Romaine's class. They're wondering if you get to name the new creatures you discovered.
Unfortunately, I'm not a marine scientist. And so the scientists usually get to decide the name of the creatures based on where they were found, some of their unique features. And they haven't asked me to help because I wouldn't know the first thing about how to name a marine creature. However, I have been able to name about 80 features on the seafloor that we mapped. So when we found big mountains underwater or big new canyons, because my team found them and mapped them, I got to name them.
All right, very cool. We're going to take another trip back to Ohio. We have another classroom of 4th graders, Mrs. Swangstu's crew.
Okay, go ahead.
What are we doing today?
How long did it take to build the submersible?
Okay, well, it happened in stages. It took about 1.5 years to design it, and then it took about 2 years to build it, and then about 6 months to test it pretty intensively. So about 4.5 years. It takes a long time to do really difficult things like that, but actually that was considered extremely fast. It can take 10 years or more to design something like that if, say, the government was doing it and they do a different way. But it took about four or 5 years.
All right, here comes another question ready on the whiteboard.
Anthony.
Did you get to keep anything when you went to the sea?
Absolutely. I paid for everything, so I got to keep a lot of things. I got to keep some of the rocks that we picked up from the bottom of the ocean, and a lot of things that I took down that were special to me, like flags and other things. So yeah, I got to keep pretty much whatever I wanted.
All right. Thanks, Ohio. Those were some great questions. Let's go to Vegas. We've got
Vegas,
out with us in Vegas, in Nevada. How we doing, Vegas?
Good.
Go Raiders.
So,
What is the longest time before? Wait, how
it's okay.
How long do you have to? How long are you underwater before you have to come back up?
Well, in an emergency situation, we could have stayed down for 4 days. That was a requirement by the insurance and other agencies. But our typical missions, it would take about 4.5 hours to go from the top of the ocean to the very, very bottom. We would spend a couple of hours on the bottom, maybe up to 3 or 4, and then it would take 4 hours to come back. So an entire mission, put in the sub, unable to get out, was about 12 to 14 hours. So that's a long day.
Okay.
All right. We got another question on deck. Here it comes.
How would you go down faster without harming anything, and how would you do it?
Well, we never really harmed anything when we went down because the ocean is really, really big. And we found that the sea creatures tended to stay away from us. I think they thought I was a orca or some other predator, and they didn't want anything to do with us. So we could have put more thrusters and power on the sub to go down faster, but that would have used up more energy, and then we wouldn't have had that energy to explore the bottom. So we drove at a nice, comfortable pace to get to the bottom that wasn't too long, wasn't too short, but that gave us the best ability to explore once we were there.
Good.
All right. Thanks, crew. Another good set of questions. We've got another camera classroom to visit, but before that, I want to grab something from YouTube. Miss A's class is with us, and they want to know 2 questions. First, Kraya wants to know what % of the ocean has been mapped, and Ilya wants to know how many people were on your crew. So everybody in total.
Sure. Well, great question about mapping the ocean. Believe it or not, everyone, 71% of the world is ocean. Of that, 75% is completely unknown, completely unmapped and unexplored. So if you multiply those 2 numbers, that means more than half of planet Earth is completely unknown. Still, we know more about the surface of the moon and Mars than we know about the bottom of our own planet. And so that's the answer to the first question. The second question is the ship could hold about 50 people, but we had a rotating group of people that were also supporting us from the shore. So on the ship was about maximum of 50, but we probably had another 100 or so working on the whole project all over the world. We probably involved 17 to 20 different countries and nationalities, people from Spain, from Germany, from Norway, from England, from the Philippines, from Japan. So it was very much of an international effort. That's what it took to do something this unusual.
All right. We are going back to Canada, Owen Sound in Ontario. How are we doing, Mr. Kim's crew?
Good.
Oh, I've got to tell you, the chief builder for the submersible is a guy named Patrick Leahy, who's from Canada. He's from outside St. Catharines. Go Canada. Eh?
I have a question. Were both sides of the Titanic there?
I'm sorry, we're both what?
Both sides of the Titanic.
Oh yeah, the Titanic, people need to realize it's really, really big. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be there for another 100 years. It's just going to become more and more dilapidated, more and more rusted out. But it is in 2 pieces. The front part is more recognizable, and then it takes about 20 minutes in the submarine to travel from the front to the back. The back is really dangerous. The back is much more damaged. There are cables and beams sticking out everywhere. It was probably one of the most stressful and dangerous dives I ever did.
All right.
How many college degrees do you have?
How many what?
How many college degrees do you have?
I have 3. I have a bachelor's degree from Stanford. I earned a master's degree in statistics and operations research from MIT. And I also got a business degree from Harvard University. Yeah, I studied a lot. I tested well, so that helps.
All right. Owen Sound, great questions from Canada. Very cool. All right. Well, Victor, we still have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to grab a couple questions off of YouTube.
Sure.
Let's see. Okay, Miss Sloat's class is with us, and they are curious about the biggest animal you've encountered on an ocean trip.
Oh, wow. Well, thanks for that question, Ms. Sloat. We were extremely fortunate when we were in the Southern Ocean off the coast of Antarctica. We are pretty sure we saw a blue whale, which is the largest animal in the world. We obviously didn't see all of it because most of it was underwater and we were on the ship, but we could see the top of it coming and cresting out of the water. And there was just so much wildlife in the Southern Ocean. There were penguins, there were whales of all different kinds, fish everywhere. I was shocked at just how much life there was in this very cold waters around Antarctica. It had more life in it than many of the other oceans that we've went in. So the world will always surprise you if you travel around in it. So I encourage you, if you ever get a chance, travel the world, see it all. It's an amazing place.
All right. One more from online here. Miss, there we go. Brisen's crew in Prince Edward Island would like to know, do you have any idea, or any of the scientists, what that tail was on that dog's head creature?
That's a great question. We don't know. We're surprised because there are creatures like that one, but they only stay in one place. But they have that cable that anchors them to the seafloor, and so they just stay there. This was unusual in that we think it might have had a foot where it could actually grab and let go so that in its life, it could move around, unlike the other creatures that we're used to seeing. So that's what was really shocking about us, and it was pretty cool. So we're not sure what that was, but that little ball at the bottom of it, we think that was its child. We think it was actually growing another version of itself at the bottom of that, and it kept it low so that predators wouldn't attack it. So it was a fascinating creature and completely alien looking.
Wow. We have a lot to discover down there. It's pretty cool. Okay. We've got Miss Swangstu's crew holding up their sign, so let's get this question.
How did you go to the bathroom and eat?
Well, we didn't, the former. We trained our bodies so that for the 12 or 14 hours we were in the submersible, we wouldn't have to go. We wouldn't drink anything for like half a day before we went in. So you just didn't need to. And as far as eating, we would pack a lunch. I would make my own sandwich and chips. And, you know, as you saw earlier, a Diet Coke. And when I got to the bottom, I'd take a break. We'd have a little food so we could keep ourselves alert and fueled. And yeah, it was just like having a brown bag lunch at school, but you were doing it in a submarine at the bottom of the ocean.
All right. Is that one more person with a board? We can squeeze one more in.
How about that young lady
from your crew?
Or a different one. What do we got?
There we go.
How deep did I go down the ocean? Well, I went all the way down. I went down to 10,935 meters, which is about 35,000 feet. That is almost 3 times deeper than the Titanic, and it is certainly deeper than Mount Everest is high.
All right. Vegas has a good question about obstacles. I'm going to let them ask it if
cool.
they want.
Back to Vegas.
Yeah.
Come on. Come on. Quick. Oops.
Oh.
No, right here.
Oh, it looks like he encountered an obstacle.
Yeah.
What are some problems you encountered, and were you able to solve them?
Yeah, well, it was a prototype submersible, so we had some issues. I actually had a fire at one point on the submarine at very, very deep ocean water. And outside the submarine, one of the batteries caught fire and it started melting down. And so I did what I was supposed to do. I followed my training, I followed the procedures, and I was able to isolate the problem. And therefore, the submarine was okay after that. It came up a little burned. We had to fix it. But that was a little stressful because I didn't know how bad it was going to get. So when you do these things at the edge of technology in dangerous environments, you have to be prepared for things going wrong. I've been a pilot since I was 19 years old, so I know how to fly planes and helicopters. And that was great training for emergency situations. So if any of you are thinking about becoming a pilot, I highly encourage it. It's a great skill to have.
Yeah.
All right, very cool. Maine, we'll squeak one more in from you, and then we're pretty close to wrapping for today.
All right, Maine. Uh-oh, you're on mute. I don't do sign language.
My name is Wells, and what was it like to see the Titanic?
The Titanic was very unusual. It's obviously a very famous wreck, and it's kind of eerie because so many people died there. There's no, you don't see them there. They're all gone. It was 100 years ago. So all you see is the wreck. So I was there by myself with the wreck, and it was kind of spooky. And sometimes the lights from the submarine would reflect inside the wreck. So it would look like there was someone in there. It was very spooky. It was like Halloween sometimes. But it was also a very special wreck because it has so much history. But as I said earlier, it was a very dangerous wreck because there were a lot of ropes and cables. And if that entangled the submersible, I could have been trapped. And so you had to be very, very careful around the Titanic in a way that you didn't have to when you were just around a bunch of rocks and canyons.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Cool. We'll take one final camera classroom question from Mrs. Cullen's crew.
Hi, Mrs. Cullen's group. All right, who's up?
Hey, he's coming.
How did the submarine just not float away in the ocean?
Well, when you go deep in the ocean, the currents are actually pretty weak because the ocean's very heavy and it takes a lot of energy to move the water. So the submarine would go down pretty rapidly, all things considered. And by the time we got to the bottom, the current was only about 1/4 mile an hour or 1/2 mile an hour. So sometimes, because we often didn't need to go any place in particular, we were just trying to explore, we would let the current carry us. But the submersible had pretty powerful thrusters on it, like a car or a plane, and we could push the submarine in any direction that we wanted to go. And on the longest dive we ever did, we actually traveled 5 kilometers in one direction to cover a lot of ground. So we had a lot of power.
All right. Well, Victor, one last question from YouTube. I think this is an easy one that we probably know the answer to, but do you plan on going back to the deep ocean?
Yes, I do. I did it very intensively for about 4 years. And then I sold my whole system to a marine research organization called Inkfish. And the submarine and ship are out in the Pacific right now, diving and exploring 100% for science. But I'm doing what I like to do most, which is to think about, design, and eventually build a submersible that's even more capable and more advanced than the one that I just displayed and talked about. Because that's really what I like doing, is continuing to move technology forward. And hopefully one day all you wonderful people in your classrooms can help us keep pushing the ball forward.
All right. Well, Victor, it was such a pleasure to have you with us live today. We still have lots of classrooms backstage, so I'm going to bring them in so they can get really loud. A huge goodbye and thank you from our classroom. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our classroom on YouTube. Thank you for your amazing questions. We're going to sign off for today, but we hope we see you for the rest of the month. We got a lot of live action coming your way. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Victor.
Thank you. Bye. Take care.